Hello,
Hey,
hello. We're on. This time, folks, we did not have a call. We did not prepare beforehand. So you're going to watch us prepare for this call on the call. It's going to be great.
right on it. So yeah, I mean, let's throw this as normal as in the Discord. And
Already did 15
nice.
minutes ago, but I guess I could ping him again.
No, no, we're good.
Uh,
Um,
let's see.
we should put some intro music next time. Like put a Suno Udio something. That'd be like a jingle. Maybe next time we'll
Totally.
have a jingle in here.
Some elevator music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
We also need a holding screen. I feel like we need like some little jellies, like the logo, little like floating by.
some
Um,
little jellyfish.
Or you remember the DVD those DVD weight screens where like someone did it really well in the Super Bowl. I think it was Coinbase did it last year in the Super Bowl, where like there's a little like pill and it hits the wall and then it changes the color.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
seen that? We
I
need
don't
one of
think that
those.
was last year. I think that was like 3 years ago.
Shoot. It's the
I
last
remember
time
that
I
because I was in Seattle too, and I was at a friend's house. I think that was the year where Coinbase had that commercial. FTX had Larry David.
oh,
I
it was
think
like
it
the
was
big crypto wave.
the pre crypto implosion.
Ah, yeah.
It could be wrong, but I think that was the right year. I think they were all there.
That's good. That was such a good
OpenAI,
the dancing QR code. That was genius.
yeah, no, is OpenAI had such an interesting commercial this Super Bowl about like
I
all
didn't
the
see it.
dots. It just was like I don't know. I didn't understand it. It was just like a bunch of little dots, and then it made like an image of just mankind advancing technology, essentially from like dots to like the universe creating to like riding on a horse, and then eventually it goes like chips and kind of showed the progression of humanity. But it was all like animated, just like little dots. It was like the ChatGPT dot,
Mm.
and then it was just icon like dots everywhere, and it was just I don't know. I thought it could have been a better use of. I think the Super Bowl. There's a lot of people that were watching the Super Bowl that are probably nervous about AI. I mean, like, there's a lot of people that are kind of concerned about the changes that AI is going to bring to society. I think it was an opportunity that they missed to kind of showcase opportunity versus some like generic
Or
animation.
yeah, yeah. It screams like I mean, I feel like from OpenAI's branding, they just seem to be really like sometimes they try to be artsy or like they kind of try to be like, a little bit
Right.
like grand or I mean, I guess it's good to be aspirational, but there's
Totally.
something about it. I can't put my like artsy aspirational almost.
And at the end of the day, I mean, like OpenAI is still a startup, even though it's extremely big. I don't know, maybe it's a scale up now, you'd probably call it, but
Yeah.
it's still pretty young of a business. There's still a nonprofit board, all that craziness, the Elon acquisition offer, the rejection of that offer, all the drama. It's like you could just follow OpenAI's drama um, as a full time job. I feel like, but
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, people said, I guess we can talk more about other things besides just pure AI. I remember that was feedback from 2 times ago, but that was our little taste, little AI intro.
yeah,
Fun fact: I'm gonna be trying to wear a different Hawaiian shirt for my weekly Wednesdays. I have this like a closet full of Hawaiian shirts that I never wear anymore because I work from home and I'm just it is what it is. So I'm gonna whip them out for my for weekly Wednesdays.
oh, nice, nice,
Yeah.
that's sick, cool.
Well, we've got an awesome like. I was thinking some of the things that we could talk about is in the last, 7 days there have been like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new features that have come out since the last call. I think
Whoa.
could be cool to talk about those. But like we have blog posts about them. We make videos for each one, so maybe we try to do something fun about each feature, like maybe something that we like something just interesting about it, something like really that we like. I don't know.
Yeah, no, let's do it. What are the 5 features that we released this week?
AI podcast cover art generator. One.
Cool.
Hybrid podcast hosting. 2. I'll explain what all these mean later. Social links 3, remove branding 4, pronunciation guide 5.
Nice.
Pronunciation
Right.
guide came out on the day of the last one, but it was after the call, so we wouldn't have had
Gotcha.
a chance to talk about it.
Right. I think maybe should we just like go one by one, or what do you?
Yeah. Which one? I guess we can start with whatever. Which one of those are you most eager to talk about?
I mean, there's some groupings. I think the most boring one is probably the pronunciation guide, although it was a useful utility. I don't know. So yeah, this was something that came out last Wednesday, and it actually takes up a lot of real estate in the UI. So it's in the sidebar there. It says pronunciation right underneath podcasts.
It's a prime real estate.
It is some prime real estate, but I think it was useful for a lot of people. We heard feedback where um, maybe your company name, your name, certain words were being mispronounced over and over again. Like you had to go in and phonetically spell out a word or a phrase, and that was the advice that we would give you in the past. Hey, our hosts are mispronouncing this name. What can we do? And we would always say to you, hey, um, just spell it out phonetically. And every time you saw that word, you'd have to go in and spell it out phonetically, which was kind of a pain. And you have to do that for every episode. But now, right, in that pronunciation guide, you go in and do it once. You could add it there and you put in the word that you want pronounced correctly. And then you put in the phonetic spelling. And so automatically on the back end, when you're generating audio, it just will get swapped out and it will improve that pronunciation. And you can just and make edits and changes like normal and just ensure that those pronunciations, those words are going to be pronounced right.
Yeah. Yeah, a great synopsis. A couple of things that I wanted to flag that I think are really cool about it that didn't make its way into the blog post. Maybe I'll actually edit the blog post to include these things. But one kind of did, but the other one, URLs. This was something that I remember seeing a lot of early on. People would want like their URL promoted in the podcast, but the way that things get pronounced will often be a little bit weird, right? Because all the letters are being jammed up together, right? So they like, if it's like lowercase AI and then it's, marketing, AI marketing, or it might be A marketing, there's all these like weird ways. So things like that, where you are like bundling things and only you really know how to say them because you invented them, like URLs. So now you can just immediately swap that, and then can just paste in your URL and have confidence that your URL will be promoted just the way you want it to be. Shout out to this one guy who has who has a really cool career around really high quality sculptures, and he has a website called like sculptviewai.com, but there's a dash in it or something. And the way that you have to pronounce it, he wanted the dash pronounced, and it can be very hard. Sometimes hyphens aren't pronounced. So, fun fact: URLs and things like that, very easy to pronounce.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so pronunciation guide. The other two that are pretty easy to combine into one, but there was social media links. So every podcast has its own unique website with a custom subdomain that you can choose. So it could be mypodcast.jellypod.ai. You could change that to whatever you'd like, and that's like your homepage where all your episodes will live. You could subscribe to your podcast through an RSS feed there, and now we added the ability to put in social media links and your own personal website links on that podcast page. So when you're creating a podcast or when you're editing a podcast, there's a little button that says advanced settings. You click on that button and there are slots to put in a custom website your website link, your Instagram, YouTube, Discord, LinkedIn. So that page now, if you put a link there, it'll visitors are able to just go directly to your website, and it's SEO optimized, and hopefully can drive some traffic to your social medias and your brand from your podcast.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's such a cool like for people who haven't heard of your brand or your business, you can create something that's very, it does a good job of telling the story, like the elevator pitch, right?
Totally.
And make that in a few minutes. And if people are interested, they have your contact information, they have your website. Um,
Yeah,
Affiliate marketers seem to be very interested in this.
totally.
So like, there's like a cool new product that you really feel like really strongly about, make a podcast about it, really talking about how, your own experiences with it. Um, in, obviously in an interesting way, and then just link over to the affiliate link and start to make money that way.
Nice. Yeah, totally. And then, I mean, the other thing related to your custom podcast websites were for creator tiers and up, so creator business, enterprise tiers. You're able to remove Jellypod branding. So today, on the top left hand corner, there's a Jellypod logo, and on the bottom, we'll say like this podcast is powered by Jellypod. But if you're on one of those tiers now, there's just a simple one-click button that will remove that branding. If you're interested in a feature that it's in the back of our mind, I mean, I don't know if we've discussed it really, but like I kind of see it really making sense to allow businesses to put their own logo there um, in the top left hand corner. I know you could do the podcast image already. So if you have your cover art and you have your logo on there, that's probably fine. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
totally. Yeah, just the no, I mean, I think that the cool shout out there is it's just the first step in really owning the branding of your
right.
podcast. So right now, let's remove ours. Next, let's add more of yours. And Pearson, I think, talked about it on the last one, but like a custom domain, right? So you can begin to really own the whole thing. Remove the jelly pod entirely, uh, and really begin to. I mean, there's just so many cool like business focused podcasts. I recently uncovered one that this guy's got a chess academy, and he makes
Ah,
like 5-minute podcasts that like talk about cool new chess strategies for
oh, that's
beginners.
interesting.
Yeah, so like if you have like, and I think it's mostly an academy for kids, obviously, and so you can play it for your kids and like an educational podcast. They learn some new, um,
That's super
uh,
cool. I mean, I have a
yeah,
friend and he's super into chess. Lucas, if you're on here, how's it going? But
Lucas.
he was sharing how a lot of professional and like advanced chess players will play chess in their head. Like they'll
Mm,
have like the board in their head and they'll think about the moves and just they know their opponent's moves in their head and they'll just like practice moves and like strategies and things in their head.
wow.
And I could see that being like if they're talking about chess and like a move, like you're playing a podcast where it's like opponent moves to pawn to c4,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then in your head you're thinking about it, and you're like, what should I do here or something? I don't know. That's a pretty cool
yeah, yeah, yeah.
use case.
No, I mean, there's like like you've always talked about this future where the script that you write in your podcast begin to learn from you.
Hmm.
And you can totally imagine a world like this where there are like these like highly expert chess podcasts being made, right? And people are editing in these move sequences and like the thoughts in between. And
Hmm.
then and then like, their future episodes get more and more like that. And then it becomes sort of streamlined to make these like incredibly
Totally.
like rich,
Right.
podcasts within minutes.
Right.
Um,
No, that's super
Super cool.
interesting. Yeah. So okay. So that's all the custom website stuff. Pronunciation guide. What was the other one that
The
not the
last
cover?
two are cover art and hybrid podcast hosting.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hybrid. That one's a super easy feature. It's heavily requested, so you have the ability to download your podcast with JellyPod. Um, and sometimes people they would create the JellyPod podcast and they wanted to make some tweaks in like an external editor. So now you can upload episodes, like episode recordings, whether they are AI generated on JellyPod and you did post processing or a real episode. There was a user that was trying to do a hybrid podcast. That's why we call this like the hybrid podcast feature. But now you could have maybe every other day you have an AI podcast that goes out through JellyPod, but once a week you do like an actual real podcast, and you could host that all through JellyPod, completely free. We're still only we only charge on audio generations. So if you just want to use us for a podcast hosting provider, go ahead. Feel free to do that and upload all your videos and your audio to JellyPod, and add in an AI podcast in between some episodes. And we're
Totally.
interested to see how I think people will use that, because I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny that you say real podcasts, because I've definitely said that before as well.
Probably shouldn't say that. I think they're all real podcasts.
Two words that I've been using with this is like traditional podcasts, or the more literal recorded podcasts. So there is recorded podcasts, and then there are generated podcasts. That's my favorite as of late, but I do say sometimes traditional versus AI if I'm trying to be more open AI, aspirational.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. It's a good call out, I think. Yeah, because yeah. I mean, it definitely, like the whole idea of like media generation now, it's changing, and it's like these are just as real as any other recorded podcast. So
totally,
maybe even
especially
more.
with the clones. These clones, I mean, some people would blow us away. It's still
right.
We were just talking about it, I think, half an hour ago about this. There's this one very interesting podcast where it's like this person has such a unique voice and they've cloned it and it sounds supernatural. And
once in a while start screaming. Like, what are you doing? Why is the clone starting to scream? It's doesn't make sense, but
luckily you can regenerate it. But that's great. But like listening to it was incredible. She's teaching. She has done this awesome podcast about how to teach young kids how to read, and like there's all these interesting things that you don't think about as an adult, like that kids will often, like anybody, but like kids especially when learning how to read will guess at words. Totally. They'll guess at the first letter. I mean, we all kind of read that way anyway, right? Like you can have the middle letters be jumbled up. Have you seen that before? Where the first letter, last letter. But kids will do that too. But the trouble is they don't have the training data set to like be able to do that effectively. So they're just like, and that reminds me so much of like my little sister. She when she was like, however old, when we tried to get her the My Baby Can Read stuff, we were so proud of her because we would show her the word chimpanzee and she would say chimpanzee, and we'd be like, wow, she's a genius. But then we realized that she just like saw the big word and thought it was chimpanzee, saw the little word, thought it was cat, and would just guess at the scale of the word. So then when you showed her, onomatopoeia, it was chimpanzee.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All stuff.
Well, it's weird. It's so interesting. But and this kind of goes directly into the cover art generation. So this is probably my the coolest feature that we've released out of this batch, I think personally. So in the past, if you did upload a episode cover art or a podcast cover art when you create your new podcast, it was a generic, just gradient background with some text on it. But now, if you don't upload a cover image, if you don't provide one, we'll generate one for you based on your podcast title, the description, the content of the podcast, and make one that's thematically correct based on your podcast. So you probably never have to go out to ChatGPT, to DALL-E, or Midjourney and create a podcast cover art nowadays. You could just stay in JellyPod and just
or Canva
works for you, or Canva, or
that's what I was using before that.
Right. So yeah, so check it out. I mean, I made one about Harry Potter. It was Quidditch. It kind of had the topography correct to be like wizardy and whatever. Jason, I know you made what'd you make?
I made one about cover art. It was meta.
Oh yeah, right.
I made a podcast. It's called Cover Story. I thought that was a pretty good name for a podcast about cover art. Right. But my biggest shout about this functionality is it makes unique podcast art from generation to generation. And like, I don't know, but like Midjourney, if you use any of these generators, Dolly, they have a certain style to them that you can sort of pick up on. You're like, this was like kind of AI generated. What's so cool about these is that they don't feel that way.
Right. For sure. No, I totally. I mean, we spent some time thinking about those generations and making sure that there was a wide enough data set of like what goes into podcast cover art, about like the shapes, the colors, and just really being able to represent a wide array of images that, like you said, don't really traditionally have that feel. I know Dolly, for example, has a really glossy, rounded feel, um, and you can immediately identify that was like created in Dolly. Whereas other models definitely have a unique take on how they generate. Most of the times, you can get around that through proper prompting if you're really specific and precise, and the style you could fix and tweak that to get them to be improved. But that's not something that you want to be doing. You don't want to have to be thinking a lot about like the stylistic components of your art. Like when you're leaving JellyPod and going to another platform that's more general purpose, and you're trying to get that image generator to create a piece of podcast art, you're going to have to really think about like, okay, what goes into podcast art? Okay, I need the title in the middle. That's probably big. It probably should say podcast. Um, Maybe there's some subtitle text. There are probably some thematic elements. And that's all stuff that's pretty hard. I mean, if you've ever used Midjourney or any of these image generators to prompt for an image, to get what you're thinking about, the idea that's in your head, into the actual image, it takes, you got to be pretty prescriptive. So um, we just want to eliminate that and keep you in JellyPod and make it easy. And this is for all accounts. Anyone can create podcast art now. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah. One question that I had that maybe people might have as well is does it just look at the podcast information, or does it take in the host information as well?
So we're not using the host information. I think that the podcast title and description are giving enough context to make that art work. And this also helps in the case where you want to swap out a host. I think the current flow is you create your podcast. That's why you create your podcast at the top and you add the host beneath that. You might switch out some hosts. So pretty distinct, I would say.
Yeah. Just wanted to know.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. And then people were asking, and then I think we answered in the comments of the YouTube video, but just for the people that are listening, some people asked, so the cover art is generated at the podcast level, not at the episode level. So episodes will inherit that same cover art from the core podcast. But if you want to do a bunch of episodes with different cover art, then you should just be making multiple podcasts. And then if you combine this concept with the hybrid hosting that we talked about earlier, you can actually do some cool combinations where you can create a podcast on a new topic, get a new cover art, and then download the MP3, download the image, and then put them all into some like various topic podcast series that you've got, where like you want to be hopping around all over the place. So it's kind of cool to seeing those two features come together to unlock some of the ways people really wanted to use it.
Right. And I mean, like, talking about that, like, the reason why, I mean, we kind of want to, in the ideal world, you come in, you have like one podcast and you do it all in JellyPod. You don't have to do that stuff, right? The episode cover art, to get it to like, most of the times you don't need per episode cover art. Thematically, it's hard to get them to stay consistent. So if you have, your podcast cover, there's elements in there like color, sans versus serif fonts, and we just kind of wanted to make sure that we're giving the best experience first. So generating per image podcast art or per episode podcast art was just something that like you could see as a feature there. But for most use cases, your episodes will just inherit the podcast cover. If you go into Spotify, most of the times, most episodes won't have their own image unless you get into like those really high production value ones where there's a guest and it makes sense to put the new guest on the cover or
Yeah.
whatnot.
We might
So,
eventually get, there's a good chance that we eventually get there. Just as
right,
like, there's so many cool requests about. I mean, these podcasts are only gonna get better. That's what's so cool. Is like everyone,
right.
all the users are getting better, but on top of that, the system itself will get better.
Totally. And that's like the interesting thing here is like podcasting, traditional podcasting, recorded podcasting. It's a very distributed workflow. I mean, you as a podcaster aren't leveraging the improvements that other people are doing. So if, Andrew Huberman and Brian Johnson, they have their own two health podcasts, right? And they're siloed. But by using like coming to JellyPod, we can leverage and distribute these improvements across the board to everybody. So the system as a whole is improving. So that when we add this ability to do podcast cover arts, if we can make them better, everybody gets those. If we figure out a way to make the scripts more engaging or the host generations and these things, it's not just for you, it's for everybody. And so it's really going to grow the market of AI podcasting, which is pretty cool. It's like traditional media didn't have that. Traditional media creation doesn't have that. They're very siloed, but now like we can all benefit from the economies of scale essentially of
And
AI
social media,
podcast.
interestingly, I love where you're going with this, or well, at least what and now where you're going with this. But what sparked in my head, totally
Right,
about traditional media, but then social media actually, funny enough, functioned as this sort of like bridge. Because from what I understand about social media, creators are often trying to copy what's working.
totally,
So they're all looking at each other, trying to learn from one another, but still doing that manually. So you have
absolutely.
these completely siloed traditional media outlets, and you have social media trying to interconnect, and now you have AI media actually facilitating these real-time connections, so people can learn from each other and test what's working
For sure.
without even knowing it.
And this is really cool you bring this up because I mean, you can imagine a world where um, we like for let's say in a world where we have video um, captions, the color of the captions, the speed of those captions, like all these improvements can be done at the system level, at JellyPod's level, and then we can essentially choose based on your show what we think will make your show do the best, based on current trends, based on all this stuff that the system understands, and so that you could just come in and do the high level creative uh, ideation and then leave it to us to optimize for your different platforms, to Spotify, to YouTube. Like what does Spotify like what are the types of content that Spotify enjoys versus YouTube, what's going to be pushed to the YouTube algorithm. And if we know what the platforms you're distributing to, we can slightly adjust to make that be better, more optimized for those platforms. And that's just like a inherent benefit of like using a platform like this. So
Totally. And this is something that I've been dreaming about for a while. I don't really know how exactly it'll work, but then it opens up the door for these interesting, for like almost experimentation, right?
right,
Where like in a world that's not possible today, right? Where, because it's being generated, so quickly and like almost programmatically, um, you can experiment with what works, what doesn't work, and then actually get data behind it in terms of are people listening to it, staying with it, and
mm-hmm.
then pass along those benefits to obviously the creator who discovered the improvement, but then also to the whole
Totally,
group.
totally. Um, I know we're kind of right at 10:30, but if there's any questions, anyone in the chat, shoot them our way. But if not, um, we hope that these new features are uh, helpful. They're used. If you have cool cover art that you want to share with us, throw it in our Discord. We have a Discord. Join it, um, And if you want to be featured in our explore page for your podcast, just share your podcast and take a look. And if you have some nice cover art, you have a cool subdomain, you have a few episodes in there, we'll feature it on JellyPod, so on our homepage.
Totally. And that just that kind of jogged this thought. What we want to start doing is we want to start bringing on creators who are interested to to promote them and their podcast and what they're trying to do. So just wanted to give a shout for folks that if you're interested in hopping on a live stream, hopping on a video with me, it doesn't have to be live. We could do pre-recorded, but live seems to be easier. Send me a note at jason@jellypod.ai. I'll be sending out a more formal email to everyone, inviting them to do this. But if you want to be one of the first, you want to jump the gun, feel free to shoot that or message us in the support chat, contact jellypod.ai. Any way you can reach us, if that's interesting to you, then please do. Okay, we got one message, love the platform. Awesome. We have someone named Mark who just landed their first client from a large global organization.
Cool.
Very cool. Awesome stuff, Mark.
Sweet.
And thanks for that note, by the way. Sometimes I'm sure that you got to muster up some courage to go, post about something publicly. So thank you for doing that.
Right.
All right. Well, I guess that's it.
That's the Weekly Wednesday, but we'll catch you next week, and we'll probably not have 5 features released by then, but we'll probably have at least one.
10.
10, double it. Sweet. Okay.